I'm Amanda Wilson, 34, and I never imagined my phone would explode with texts about my sister Stephanie's wedding video. After being excluded from her dream day with Gregory Bennett, I'd tried to move on with my life. Then last Sunday, my best friend Laura sent me a link that turned my stomach. Security footage showed Gregory spitting in my mother Eleanor's face at the reception before shoving her against a wall. Now the video has gone viral. Stephanie won't answer my calls, and my family's imploding. The truth I'd warned everyone about for years is finally exposed, but at what cost? Before I share this family nightmare that's still unfolding, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. The support from strangers has honestly kept me going through this ordeal. If you've ever felt that gut instinct about someone your family couldn't see through, hit that subscribe button. This story about betrayal, truth, and ultimately justice might help someone else recognize the red flags I spotted years ago. To understand how we got here, I need to take you back to where it all began. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, in a typical middle-class family with my sister Stephanie. There's a 4-year age gap between us. I'm 34 and she's 30, and despite that difference, we were incredibly close growing up. I have vivid memories of building blanket forts in our shared bedroom, making up elaborate games in our backyard, and defending her fiercely when neighborhood kids gave her trouble. Our parents, Eleanor and Robert Wilson, raised us with strong family values. Dad worked as an accountant at a local firm, and Mom taught second grade at Springfield Elementary. We weren't wealthy, but we never lacked anything important. Family dinner was sacred in our house, a time when everyone shared their day and talked through problems together. I always took my role as big sister seriously. When Stephanie struggled with algebra, I tutored her after school. When she had her heart broken by her first boyfriend in 10th grade, I was the one who stayed up all night with her, eating ice cream and assuring her better days were ahead. We shared clothes, secrets, and dreams. She was my maid of honor when I married Michael Davis 8 years ago, and she was the first person we called when our daughter Emma was born 7 years ago. After high school, our paths diverged naturally. I went to community college, then earned my nursing degree. I fell in love with Michael during my clinical rotations. He was a respiratory therapist at the same hospital. We settled down in a small house just 20 minutes from our parents, and I've been working at Memorial Hospital ever since. My life isn't glamorous, but it's fulfilling. I love being a nurse, a wife, and a mom to Emma. Stephanie, though, always wanted more. She was the beautiful one, the ambitious one. From childhood, she talked about escaping Springfield, which she considered boring and limiting. She earned a marketing degree from Boston University and, 5 years ago, took a job with a prestigious firm in Boston. The geographical distance was just the beginning of our growing apart. In Boston, Stephanie cultivated a new image and social circle. Her Instagram transformed from casual family photos to carefully curated posts featuring exclusive restaurants, designer clothes, and connections with local influencers. Our monthly sister calls became less frequent, and when we did talk, she seemed distracted, often cutting conversations short. Still, she came home for major holidays, and I tried to maintain our bond despite our different lifestyles. Then Gregory Bennett entered the picture 2 years ago. Stephanie met him at a charity gala her company organized. She called me immediately after, gushing about this incredible man who owned multiple real estate developments across New England. She described him as sophisticated, worldly, and from real money, something she'd apparently come to value in Boston. I first met Gregory at our family Christmas gathering that year. I noticed immediately how he kept a hand on Stephanie at all times, not in an affectionate way, but possessively. During dinner, he repeatedly interrupted Stephanie's stories to correct details or redirect conversations toward himself. When she mentioned a childhood memory about us stealing cookies from the kitchen, he laughed and said, "Honey, you're telling it all wrong," before launching into his own version that barely resembled what happened. After dinner, I pulled Stephanie aside and gently asked if she was happy. "Of course I am," she snapped, clearly annoyed. "Gregory is the best thing that's ever happened to me. He has connections and influence I've only dreamed about." When I pointed out that he seemed controlling, she dismissed it as him being protective and detail-oriented. Our conversation ended with her accusing me of being jealous of her sophisticated new life. Over the next few months, I watched through social media and family gatherings as my sister slowly transformed. The changes were subtle at first, adopting Gregory's political opinions, using phrases he commonly used, dressing in the conservative style he preferred. She stopped posting about girls' nights out and began exclusively sharing photos with Gregory or his approved friends. Her once vibrant laugh became a controlled, polite chuckle. Our parents noticed too, though they were initially impressed by Gregory's charm and wealth. Mom eventually confided in me that something felt off about him, especially how he insisted on answering questions directed at Stephanie. Dad was more blunt in private, telling me he didn't trust that smooth-talking city boy. Still, they wanted to support Stephanie's choices and worried that voicing concerns would push her away. The incident that truly alarmed me happened at our cousin Megan's wedding. Gregory monitored everything Stephanie ate, removing bread from her plate with a whispered, "Remember what we talked about, babe." When she reached for a glass of champagne for the toast, he smoothly intercepted it and handed her water instead. Later, I overheard him criticizing her choice of shoes, saying they made her look cheap and questioning why she hadn't worn the ones he'd selected. That night, I noticed bruises on Stephanie's upper arm. When I asked about them, her eyes darted to Gregory across the room before she laughed too loudly and said, "Oh, I'm just clumsy." "You know me." I didn't know her that way at all. Stephanie had been a dancer throughout school and was always graceful. I started researching controlling relationships and recognized too many warning signs. When I tried showing Stephanie an article about emotional abuse, she blocked me on Instagram for 3 days. She later unblocked me with a message, saying Gregory thought she had overreacted, which somehow felt even worse than the blocking itself. As months passed, our family watched helplessly as Stephanie drifted further into Gregory's world. She missed our dad's 60th birthday because Gregory had suddenly planned a weekend in the Hamptons. She canceled our traditional sister's Christmas shopping trip because Gregory felt she should focus on buying gifts for his business associates instead. Every boundary crossed made the next one easier for him to push. I knew something was deeply wrong, but I felt powerless to help someone who refused to recognize the danger she was in. Everything came to a head last spring. Stephanie announced her engagement on Instagram with a professionally photographed post captioned, "I said yes to forever with the man of my dreams. Bennett Bride 2023. My parents and I learned about it at the same time as her thousands of followers. No phone call, no family announcement, just a public declaration featuring a massive diamond ring and Gregory's self-satisfied smile. My feelings were complicated. I wanted to be happy for my sister, but alarm bells were ringing louder than wedding bells in my mind. When Stephanie finally called our parents 2 days later, she explained they'd been too caught up in the moment to make personal calls. She followed up with a text inviting me to lunch in Boston to discuss wedding plans. I arrived at the upscale restaurant. Gregory had selected a place where the menus didn't even list prices, feeling hopeful this might be a chance to reconnect. Stephanie was already seated, checking her watch nervously. She looked beautiful but thin, her cheekbones more pronounced than I remembered. When I hugged her, she flinched slightly before returning the embrace. "I need to be back at the office by 2, so let's order right away," she said, bypassing any personal conversation. Throughout lunch, she robotically listed Gregory's expectations for the wedding. The exclusive venue at his family's estate, the 5-figure designer dress she'd already ordered, the strictly curated guest list. She didn't ask about my family or seem interested in my input. As she reached for her water glass, her sleeve pulled back, revealing distinct finger-shaped bruises around her wrist. She quickly tugged the fabric down, but not before I saw. My heart pounded as I gathered my courage. "Steph," I said quietly, "are you safe with Gregory?" Her face transformed instantly, a mask of defensiveness replacing her practiced smile. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Those bruises for starters, and the way you've changed everything about yourself since meeting him. You don't seem happy, Steph. You just can't stand that I'm successful," she hissed. "You've always been jealous of my life. I have everything you never achieved: a prestigious career, a wealthy fiancé, connections to people who actually matter." Her words stung, but I recognized they weren't truly hers. They sounded rehearsed, like something she'd been told to believe. "This isn't about me," I insisted. "I'm worried about you. Gregory controls what you wear, what you eat, who you talk to. That's not love, Steph." "You know nothing about love," she snapped. "Look at your boring little life in Springfield, your nurse's salary and your cookie-cutter house. Gregory is helping me become the person I'm meant to be." The conversation continued to deteriorate until Gregory himself appeared at our table. He hadn't been invited to lunch, but somehow knew exactly where we were. His smile didn't reach his eyes as he placed a possessive hand on Stephanie's shoulder. "I was just passing by and thought I'd surprise my beautiful fiancé," he said smoothly, though the restaurant was nowhere near his office. "I hope you don't mind me joining you ladies." His eyes flicked to Stephanie's barely touched salad. "Not hungry today, sweetheart?" The question sounded casual, but I caught the undercurrent of criticism. I couldn't stay silent. "We were having a private sister lunch, Gregory. I haven't seen Stephanie in months." His expression hardened momentarily before he recovered his charm. "Family is so important. That's why I'm making Stephanie part of the Bennett family." He turned to her. "Isn't that right, darling?" When Stephanie nodded meekly, something in me snapped. "She already has a family," I said firmly. "One that doesn't try to control her every move or isolate her from people who love her." The restaurant seemed to go silent. Gregory's facade cracked, revealing a flash of the rage I suspected Stephanie often saw in private. "I think," he said with dangerous quietness, "that you should be careful about making accusations you can't back up." "I'm not making accusations," I replied, holding his gaze. "I'm stating facts. My sister has changed since meeting you, and not for the better." He turned to Stephanie. "Are you going to let her talk to me like this?" His tone made it clear there was only one acceptable answer. My sister looked trapped between us, visibly trembling. I saw a flash of the real Stephanie, scared, confused, and desperate for approval before she made her choice. "I think you should leave, Amanda," she said flatly. "If you can't support my relationship, I don't want you at my wedding." Gregory's triumphant smile made my blood boil. "Stephanie, please." "You heard her," Gregory interrupted. "I think it's best if you go." I left the restaurant in tears, but immediately began calling and texting Stephanie once I reached my car. All went unanswered. Over the next few days, my messages delivered but received no response. When I called our parents, I learned Stephanie had already contacted them with her version of events, that I had embarrassed her in public with unfounded accusations against Gregory. Mom was distraught. "She says you called Gregory abusive in the middle of a restaurant," she said. "Amanda, how could you make a scene like that?" I tried explaining what I'd witnessed, but even my parents seemed reluctant to believe Gregory could be as manipulative as I claimed. "He's always so polite to us," Dad said. "Maybe you misinterpreted things." I felt completely alone in my concerns until a week later when my parents hosted a dinner intended to clear the air. Gregory and Stephanie arrived looking like a power couple from a magazine cover. Throughout dinner, he charmed my parents with stories and compliments while I watched Stephanie check his facial expressions before speaking. The fragile peace shattered when Gregory pulled out his phone during dessert. "I think we should address the elephant in the room," he announced, scrolling through his screen. "Amanda, these messages are extremely concerning." He displayed screenshots of texts supposedly from me to Stephanie. "Your relationship is pathetic and Gregory is only with you for your connections, and even, you're not smart enough to see he's using you." I gasped. "Those aren't from me. I never wrote any of that." Stephanie looked devastated. "Stop lying, Amanda. They came from your number." The horrible truth dawned on me. Gregory had somehow accessed my information. Later, I discovered he'd gotten into Stephanie's cloud account where she'd stored my contact details, allowing him to spoof texts from my number. But in that moment, I appeared to be the liar. "I would never say those things to you," I insisted, tears forming. "Gregory is manipulating this situation, just like he manipulates you." Gregory stood up, the perfect picture of righteous indignation. "I think we've heard enough. Stephanie has been nothing but supportive of your life choices, Amanda, while you've clearly been harboring resentment toward her success." That night ended with Stephanie storming out, declaring she wanted nothing more to do with me. My parents, though confused, seemed to believe the text evidence over my denials. In the weeks that followed, family members and childhood friends began distancing themselves from me, having heard Stephanie's version that I was trying to sabotage her happiness out of jealousy. I started seeing a therapist to cope with the gaslighting and isolation. Dr. Patterson helped me understand I wasn't crazy. The patterns I recognized in Gregory's behavior were textbook emotional abuse tactics. But that knowledge did little to heal the pain of losing my sister and watching her disappear into an increasingly dangerous relationship. As summer arrived, so did the wedding invitation's elegant cream envelopes with gold embossing addressed to my parents, to my cousins, to mutual friends. Everyone received one except me, my husband Michael, and our daughter Emma. The deliberate exclusion from my only sister's wedding felt like a physical blow. Mom called me in tears after receiving their invitation. I tried talking to her, Amanda. I told her she'd regret not having her sister there, but she refuses to discuss it. She just says, "You made your choice." The worst part was explaining to Emma why she wouldn't be a flower girl for Auntie Steffi as previously promised. My 7-year-old couldn't understand the adult drama, and her innocent questions broke my heart. "Does Auntie Steffi not love us anymore?" she asked one night. I assured her that family love doesn't disappear, even when people make mistakes, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself anymore. My parents faced an impossible decision: attend without me or boycott in solidarity. I insisted they should go. "Don't make this worse by forcing her to choose," I told them. "She needs to know her family is still there for her, even if I can't be." Through the family grapevine, I learned the wedding had spiraled into an extravagant affair under the control of Gregory's parents, Harold and Victoria Bennett. The venue had changed from a beautiful Boston hotel to the exclusive Bennett family estate in the Berkshires. The budget had ballooned to over $300,000 more money than Michael and I would make in 3 years combined. Mom reported back after meeting Gregory's parents at a wedding planning dinner. "They're different," she said carefully, "very concerned about appearances." Victoria kept talking about which state senators and business leaders would be attending. Dad was more blunt. "Bunch of snobs who think their money makes them better than everyone else." Stephanie selected 6 bridesmaids, all new friends from Gregory's social circle. Not one childhood friend or cousin made the cut. Through Instagram, I watched as these strangers accompanied my sister to cake tastings and dress fittings experiences I had always imagined sharing with her. The dress itself cost more than my car, a custom-designed gown that looked nothing like the princess-style dress Stephanie had dreamed of since childhood. In photos, she smiled brightly, but her eyes seemed vacant as Victoria Bennett fussed with the train and dictated alterations to the seamstress. The bachelorette party pictures showed a yacht excursion in the Hamptons, with Stephanie surrounded by women I'd never met. She looked beautiful but tense, her smile not reaching her eyes in a single photo. Several showed her checking her phone, anxiously, likely responding to Gregory's constant monitoring. "He calls her every hour during work events," our cousin Jessica told me. I overheard her assuring him she wasn't drinking at the engagement party. She seemed terrified she'd miss his call. Extended family members who didn't understand the full situation began taking sides. Some thought I was overreacting to normal pre-wedding stress. Others suggested I should swallow my pride and apologize for whatever I'd done. Few believed my concerns about Gregory's controlling behavior were legitimate. Even longtime family friends chose sides. The Millers, who had known us since childhood, attended Stephanie's bridal shower, but stopped returning my calls. Later, Mrs. Day 70's teen A1. Miller explained awkwardly that she didn't want to get involved in sister drama. It seemed easier for people to believe I was being petty than to consider that someone as charismatic as Gregory could be abusive. 2 months before the wedding, Mom called me sounding worried. "Stephanie seems different lately, more anxious. She barely spoke during lunch yesterday, and Gregory kept answering questions for her." She paused, "And she's lost so much weight. That beautiful dress needed significant alterations because she's gotten so thin." Dad reported that Gregory's parents had insisted on a prenuptial agreement heavily favoring their son. Robert tried to get her to consult an independent lawyer, Mom said, but Gregory scheduled the signing during her work hours and brought the family attorney to explain everything. Through a mutual friend who worked at Stephanie's company, I learned my sister had expressed second thoughts about the wedding but felt trapped. "She said she's invested too much to back out now," my friend reported. "And she's afraid of what Gregory might do if she tried to leave." This information tormented me. Should I attempt to contact Stephanie again despite the consequences? Would another attempt to reach her push her further away or provide the lifeline she needed? After much deliberation, I decided to send a private card to our parents' house where Stephanie would be staying the night before the wedding. I wrote simply, "I love you unconditionally, no matter what. If you ever need me, day or night, I'm here. Love always, Amanda." I included my phone number, though I knew she had it. I wanted her to know the door remained open. The week of the wedding arrived, and my parents prepared to attend without me. Mom promised to send photos, though she seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Victoria Bennett has hired security to check guest IDs at entry, she told me, bewildered. What kind of wedding needs bouncers? The night before the ceremony, I took Emma to the movies, trying to distract myself from thoughts of what should have been. Michael ordered my favorite takeout and opened a bottle of wine. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said, remember, none of this is your fault. You tried to protect your sister when no one else would. I went to bed that night with a heaviness in my chest, scrolling through old photos of Stephanie and me as children gap-toothed grins at the beach, matching Halloween costumes, her holding baby Emma for the first time. I wondered how we had reached this point, where the person I'd protected all her life now saw me as the enemy. The wedding day dawned bright and clear. While Stephanie prepared to walk down the aisle, I took Emma to the zoo, my phone constantly in hand awaiting any update from my parents. The afternoon passed in strange silence, no texts from Mom, which was unusual. By evening my anxiety had peaked. Why wasn't anyone responding? At 8:30 p.m., a cryptic text finally came through from Jessica. Something happened with Aunt Eleanor. Call me when you can. My hands shook as I called immediately, but the call went to voicemail. I tried my parents repeatedly with the same result. By midnight, I was frantic, imagining all sorts of scenarios. Had Mom fallen? Had there been an accident? When my phone finally rang at 12:15 a.m., I lunged for it. Mom? What happened? Are you okay? We're coming to your house, she said, her voice shaky. We'll be there in about an hour. Mom, you're scaring me. What happened? Not on the phone, honey. We'll explain everything when we get there. The longest hour of my life followed as I paced our living room, Michael trying unsuccessfully to calm me down. When headlights finally swept across our windows, I ran outside to find my parents looking disheveled and exhausted. Mom had a visible red mark on her cheek that was developing into a bruise. Inside, the full story emerged, each detail more horrifying than the last. The ceremony itself was beautiful, Mom began, hands trembling around the mug of tea Michael had prepared. Stephanie looked gorgeous, if too thin. The estate was like something from a magazine, flowers everywhere, champagne fountains, string quartet. The Bennetts clearly spent a fortune. Dad sat beside her on our couch, his arm protectively around her shoulders. I'd never seen him look so angry. Everything seemed fine through dinner, he continued. Speeches, dancing, the usual wedding stuff, though it felt cold somehow. More like a business function than a celebration. The trouble began during the reception. Mom had been showing some wedding photos to Gregory's aunt, casually mentioning, Amanda would have loved the centerpieces. She and Stephanie used to press flowers as children. Gregory, apparently passing by, overheard Amanda's name and approached. According to my parents, his charming facade instantly vanished. He got this look in his eyes, Mom said, voice quavering. He said I was deliberately trying to cause drama by mentioning you at his wedding. I tried to apologize, but he just got more agitated, saying I'd ruined Stephanie's perfect day with my inappropriate comments. Dad jumped in. I told him to lower his voice and speak respectfully to your mother. That's when he really lost it, said we were just like Amanda and trying to undermine his marriage. According to my parents, Gregory stormed off, but the incident wasn't over. Later, when Mom went to the restroom, Gregory followed her into the hallway. This area, crucially, was covered by the venue's security cameras. He backed me against the wall, Mom whispered, tears forming. He was saying terrible things that we'd raised a manipulative bitch in you, that Stephanie would be cutting ties with all of us after the wedding. When I tried to move past him, Our voice broke. He spit in your mother's face, Dad finished, his voice hard with fury, right in her face, then shoved her against the wall. I was looking for your mom and saw it happen from down the hall. I ran over and pulled him off her. Gregory's father quickly appeared, physically threatening my father while Gregory continued his tirade. Security arrived but seemed uncertain how to handle the situation given the powerful family involved. The most heartbreaking part came next. Stephanie just stood there, Mom said, wiping tears. She saw everything but wouldn't look me in the eye. When Gregory claimed I had attacked him verbally, she nodded along. She called me dramatic and said I should leave if I couldn't be happy for them. My parents, humiliated and concerned for their safety, left the reception immediately. The Bennett family closed ranks, with Victoria telling other guests my mother had had too much to drink and caused a scene. We didn't know what to do, Dad explained. We thought about calling the police, but worried it would make things worse for Stephanie. She seemed terrified, Amanda, like she was trapped. I was processing this horrific information when Mom added the detail that would change everything. A security guard pulled your father aside as we were leaving. He said he was disgusted by what happened and that the whole incident was recorded on security cameras. My parents decided against pressing charges initially, fearing retaliation against Stephanie. We agreed to give her space for a few days, hoping she might reach out once the honeymoon period wore off. 5 days later, my best friend Laura sent me a text. "Oh my God, Amanda, call me now. It's about Gregory." I called immediately, and Laura was breathless with shock. "It's all over the internet. Security footage from the wedding. Gregory attacking your mom. Someone leaked it." Sure enough, the security footage had been anonymously uploaded to social media. The black and white video clearly showed Gregory following my mother, spitting in her face, and shoving her against the wall before my father intervened. Within hours, it had gone viral with hashtags like Wedding from Hell and Gregory Bennett trending nationwide. I watched in horror, seeing the assault on my mother from this clinical, detached angle. The footage was worse than I'd imagined, Gregory's face contorted with rage, my mother's shock and fear, my father rushing to defend her. Most painful was glimpsing Stephanie in the background, frozen in place, neither helping our mother nor stopping her new husband. The internet exploded with outrage. People quickly identified Gregory and the Bennett family, their prominent business making them easy targets. Calls to boycott Bennett real estate properties spread across social media. Gregory's workplace, the family company, issued a terse statement about investigating the circumstances of the video. The Bennett family hired a crisis PR firm that issued statements claiming the video was taken out of context and that Eleanor Wilson had provoked Gregory with inappropriate comments. This only fueled public interest as people demanded to know what comment could possibly justify spitting on an older woman. Most disturbing were the comments from other women claiming they'd had similar experiences with Gregory. "He dated my roommate in college. This is exactly how he operated, charming in public, monster in private," wrote one. Another commented, "He threw a drink in my face at a charity event in 2019 when I accidentally bumped into him. Rich boy with zero consequences." Stephanie completely disappeared from social media as the backlash intensified. My calls still went unanswered. I worried constantly about her safety, imagining Gregory's rage now being directed at her behind closed doors. Media requests flooded my social accounts, reporters wanting the sisters' perspective on the viral video. I declined all interviews, focused instead on supporting my parents and protecting Emma from the fallout. She'd already faced questions at school from classmates who'd heard their parents discussing the video. Sitting in my living room that night after the video went viral, I felt sick. The public vindication of my concerns about Gregory brought no satisfaction, only fear for my sister and regret that I hadn't somehow done more to prevent this disaster. If you've ever had your worst suspicions confirmed in the most public way possible, you know this terrible feeling. Nothing prepares you for seeing someone you love being hurt, even when you tried to warn them. I'd give anything to hear from my sister right now, so if you're in a similar situation with someone who won't listen to warnings about a toxic relationship, don't give up on them. Keep that door open, because they'll need you when the truth finally comes out. The week following the video leak was chaos. I took emergency leave from the hospital, partly to support my parents, and partly because reporters had begun showing up at my workplace. Memorial Hospital implemented security measures, escorting me to my car and screening calls to the nursing station. My focus became protecting my family from the media firestorm. I worked with hospital administration to issue a brief statement asking for privacy, but the internet's appetite for drama was insatiable. Amateur sleuths began digging into the Bennett family history, uncovering previous scandals that had been buried with money and influence. A Reddit thread dedicated to the incident exploded with stories from people claiming to have encountered Gregory or the Bennett family. Most disturbing were accounts from several women alleging similar controlling and abusive behavior from Gregory in previous relationships. One former girlfriend wrote anonymously about Gregory monitoring her text messages and isolating her from friends, exactly the pattern I'd observed with Stephanie. While the public narrative formed without our input, my family struggled privately with the aftermath. My nursing colleagues rallied around me, covering shifts and screening visitors. Michael took time off to stay with Emma, who had become anxious after overhearing conversations about the video. My daughter didn't understand exactly what had happened but knew something was terribly wrong. Extended family members who had dismissed my concerns now called with awkward apologies. "We should have listened to you," my Aunt Patty admitted. "I just couldn't believe someone so charming could be so monstrous." Others remained stubbornly on the fence, suggesting my mother must have done something to provoke Gregory's reaction. The most concerning development was Stephanie and Gregory's complete disappearance. Through family connections, we learned they had abandoned their planned Maldives honeymoon and retreated to the Bennett family vacation compound in Vermont. The property was notoriously isolated, 5 acres surrounded by forest with state-of-the-art security systems. My worry for Stephanie intensified with each day of silence. Was she being prevented from contacting us? Was she in danger? Had she truly chosen Gregory over her family, even after witnessing his assault on our mother? Our family crisis escalated when a cease and desist letter arrived from the Bennett's lawyer, threatening legal action if my mother made any defamatory statements about Gregory. The letter coldly referred to the incident as a misunderstanding and implied my mother had been intoxicated, a complete fabrication, as she rarely drank. The legal threat pushed my father over the edge. That evening, he experienced chest pains severe enough that Mom called an ambulance. At the ER, doctors determined he was suffering from stress-induced angina. Watching my strong, steady father hooked to cardiac monitors because of Gregory's actions filled me with a new level of anger. "We need to report the assault," I told Mom at the hospital. "Dad's health is suffering. This isn't going away by itself." With Dad's full agreement, we filed a police report the next day. Detective Morris, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, took the case seriously despite the Bennett family's influence. "Security footage makes this pretty straightforward," she noted, reviewing the viral video. "Assault and battery, clear as day." My mother's statement was painful but necessary. Detective Morris assured us the department would handle the case professionally, regardless of the Bennett family's status. "Rich people aren't above the law in my jurisdiction," she said firmly. That evening, a devastating voicemail arrived from Stephanie to our parents' home phone. "How could you go to the police? You've ruined my life and my marriage before it's even started." I thought family was supposed to support each other, not destroy each other. Her voice sounded hollow, rehearsed like she was reading a statement someone else had written. I spent hours that night researching domestic abuse, learning how victims often defend their abusers and turn against those trying to help them. The isolation, the financial control, the emotional manipulation. Stephanie was trapped in a textbook abusive relationship, and now she was married to her abuser. A breakthrough came unexpectedly when Heather Collins, Gregory's ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago, contacted me through social media. After verifying her identity, we spoke on the phone for over an hour. Her story chilled me to the bone. "I got out after 7 months," Heather explained. "But not before he isolated me from friends, controlled my finances, and eventually became physically abusive. I actually had a restraining order against him, but his family's lawyers got it sealed." She offered to connect me with 2 other exes with similar experiences. The pattern was undeniable. Gregory selected successful, beautiful women with career ambitions, love-bombed them into quick commitment, isolated them from support networks, then gradually increased control until they were effectively trapped. When they eventually tried to leave, the Bennett family used their wealth and connections to silence them and damage their reputations. My research led to another significant discovery. Gregory had financial control of Stephanie's accounts. Through her workplace friend, I learned Gregory had convinced Stephanie to merge their finances after the engagement, giving him complete access to her savings and salary. If she wanted to leave, she would have nothing. The investigation gained momentum when Stephanie's coworker revealed she had confided fears about Gregory weeks before the wedding. "She asked if she could stay with me if things went wrong," the coworker told Detective Morris. She seemed scared but wouldn't elaborate. Most shocking was the information from a domestic violence hotline counselor who came forward after seeing the viral video. Bound by confidentiality, she couldn't share details, but confirmed a woman matching Stephanie's description had called multiple times in the weeks before her wedding, expressing fear about her fiancé's episodes of rage and asking about safety planning. All these pieces formed a terrifying picture. My sister was married to a serial abuser, isolated at a remote compound, and potentially being prevented from reaching out for help. The honeymoon period when abusers often become temporarily kinder wouldn't last. Soon the real Gregory would emerge again, and Stephanie would be in danger. I couldn't wait any longer. With the support of my parents, Detective Morris, and a domestic violence specialist named Rachel Winters, I began planning an intervention to reach Stephanie and offer her a way out. I took an extended leave of absence from the hospital, explaining to my supervisor the family emergency without sharing all the viral details she likely already knew. Michael arranged to work from home to care for Emma, shielding her from the tension pervading our lives. We agreed to tell her I was helping Auntie Steffi with some grown-up problems. Our intervention team consisted of my parents, myself, Detective Morris, unofficially, on her day off, and Rachel Winters from the domestic violence response team. Laura, my best friend and an attorney, provided legal advice but stayed behind to be our emergency contact. Rachel led us through careful planning sessions. Leaving is the most dangerous time for victims, she explained. Gregory will see this as losing control, which could trigger escalation. She helped us prepare a safety plan, secure temporary housing options, and gather emergency resources. The 5-hour drive to the Bennett vacation property in Vermont was tense. We followed Detective Morris in our separate vehicle, reviewing our approach strategy. The plan was simple but legally sound: request a wellness check based on the assault video and Stephanie's concerning communications. The Bennett compound appeared through dense pine trees, like something from a luxury real estate magazine, a massive stone and glass structure overlooking a private lake, surrounded by manicured grounds and an imposing security fence. A guard booth controlled the only entrance. Our first obstacle appeared immediately. The security guard, a stern-faced man in a tailored uniform, refused entry. "The family isn't receiving visitors," he stated flatly. Despite my mother's tears and explanations that we needed to check on Stephanie. "We're her family," Dad insisted. "We just want to make sure she's all right." "I have strict instructions," the guard replied. "No visitors without prior approval, especially anyone named Wilson." We retreated to our vehicles to regroup, but remained parked where we could see the gate. Detective Morris made calls to local Vermont authorities, explaining the situation and requesting assistance for a welfare check. Domestic violence situation, potential imprisonment, she emphasized. Our standoff continued for nearly 2 hours. During this time, a helicopter landed on the property's pad, Gregory's parents arriving to manage the situation. Shortly after, a black SUV with tinted windows delivered 3 men in expensive suits to the front gate, lawyers, we presumed. Local Sheriff Donovan finally arrived, a tall woman with a no-nonsense demeanor similar to Detective Morris. After reviewing the viral assault video and hearing our concerns, she agreed the situation warranted investigation. "Bennett property or not, I have jurisdiction to conduct a welfare check if there's reasonable concern," she stated, approaching the gate with official authority. The security guard called the main house, and minutes later, Gregory's father Harold appeared. Immaculately dressed despite the situation, he projected calm authority as he spoke with Sheriff Donovan. "This is a private family matter being blown out of proportion," he insisted. "My son and his wife are simply enjoying their honeymoon away from harassment. They've specifically asked not to be disturbed by her family after the unfortunate incident at the wedding." Sheriff Donovan remained unmoved. "I need to see and speak with Stephanie Bennett personally to confirm she's here willingly and unharmed." Harold's practiced smile faltered slightly. "Of course. I'll have her come to the gate." While we waited, I noticed movement at an upstairs window, a figure quickly disappearing behind curtains. My heart raced, recognizing Stephanie's silhouette. Sheriff Donovan noticed too. "Security cameras showing the gate view?" she asked the guard, who nodded. "So Mrs. Bennett can see who's here." She turned to Harold. "I'll need to speak with her alone, as per protocol for wellness checks." 20 minutes later, Stephanie emerged from the house, Gregory close behind her. Even from a distance, I could see how thin she'd become. Her wedding dress had clearly required significant taking in. Her movements seemed measured, careful, as if she was performing rather than simply walking. Sheriff Donovan insisted on speaking with Stephanie privately in her cruiser, citing standard procedure. Gregory protested vehemently until the sheriff mentioned the alternative was bringing Stephanie to the station for the interview. Watching my sister walk toward the police car was surreal. She passed within 20 feet of us but didn't acknowledge our presence, her eyes fixed straight ahead. Gregory's hand remained on the small of her back until the last possible moment. For 15 minutes, Sheriff Donovan spoke with Stephanie alone in the cruiser. From our vantage point, we could see my sister's expression changing from rehearsed calm to agitation to something like relief as she covered her face with her hands. When the sheriff's car door opened, Stephanie emerged looking shaken but somehow lighter. Sheriff Donovan approached us while Stephanie remained by the car. "Mrs. Bennett has agreed to leave with her family for a 48-hour cooling-off period," she announced. "She'll need to collect some personal belongings." Gregory, who had been conferring with his parents and lawyers, strode forward. "This is ridiculous. My wife is not leaving our honeymoon to go with the people who assaulted me." "Your wife," Sheriff Donovan emphasized the word, "has made her decision. I'll accompany her to collect her things." The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed ballet of tension. Gregory followed Stephanie and the sheriff into the house while we waited anxiously. His parents stood at the front entrance, Victoria's perfectly maintained composure finally showing cracks of fury. When Stephanie emerged with a small suitcase, Gregory grabbed her arm. "Remember what we discussed," he hissed, loud enough for several of us to hear. "Your things won't be here when you get back." Sheriff Donovan stepped between them. "That sounded remarkably like a threat, Mr. Bennett. Would you like to rephrase?" Gregory's face contorted momentarily before he regained control. "I'm concerned about my wife's mental state. She's been unstable lately." Stephanie flinched but remained silent as the sheriff escorted her to the gate. Only when she reached our car did she finally make eye contact with me, her expression a complex mixture of fear, shame, and something like hope. The drive away from the Bennett compound was silent at first. Stephanie sat beside me in the back seat, clutching her small suitcase like a shield. My parents exchanged worried glances from the front seats but knew better than to push for conversation. We had decided beforehand not to return to any of our homes, where Gregory might look for her. Instead, we headed for a domestic violence safe house in a neighboring county that Rachel had arranged. About 20 minutes into the drive, Stephanie's composure cracked. A small sob escaped her, then another, until she was crying uncontrollably. I tentatively put my arm around her, and she collapsed against me like she used to do when we were children. "I'm so sorry," she repeated between sobs. "I'm so sorry about Mom, about everything. I didn't know what to do." "It's okay," I whispered, holding her. "You're safe now. We've got you." When her crying subsided, Stephanie sat up straight, wiping her eyes. "There's something else you should know." She took a deep breath, her hand moving protectively to her stomach. "I'm pregnant. About 10 weeks. That's why I couldn't." Her voice broke again. The revelation hung heavy in the car. A pregnancy complicated everything, explaining both Stephanie's reluctance to leave and her ultimate decision to come with us. "No matter what you decide," I told her firmly, "we'll support you, all of us. You're not alone in this, Steph." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. I was so afraid of raising a child in that house, with him. I've seen how Gregory's father treats people, and Gregory is becoming just like him. As we continued toward the safe house, I held my sister's hand, feeling simultaneously relieved to have her back and terrified about what would come next. The Bennett family wouldn't let her go easily, especially not with their grandchild. But for now, she was safe, and that was all that mattered. If you're watching this and recognize these patterns in your own relationship or someone you love, please don't wait for a crisis. Domestic violence hotlines are confidential, and there are people who will believe you. Sometimes the hardest part is taking that first step away, but you deserve safety and respect. Has anyone here ever helped someone escape a controlling relationship? The support of just one person who believes you can make all the difference. The safe house was a converted farmhouse on several acres of land. its location known only to domestic violence, support workers, and law enforcement. Security cameras monitored the perimeter, and a trained staff member remained on site at all times. It was here, finally safe from Gregory's influence, that Stephanie began to share the full truth of her relationship. That first night, after my parents had gone to sleep in their assigned room, Stephanie and I sat in the common area drinking tea. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of the old building settling. For a long time we just sat together, the silence comfortable in a way it hadn't been for years. "I don't know where to start," Stephanie finally said, staring into her mug. "Wherever you want," I replied. "I'm just here to listen." Over the next few hours, my sister revealed the calculated way Gregory had manipulated her from the beginning. "He studied my social media before we even met," she explained. "At that charity gala, he knew exactly which wine I preferred, which designers I liked, even mentioned my favorite vacation spot in Greece. I thought it was fate, this perfect man who shared all my interests." The love-bombing phase was intense and overwhelming. Expensive gifts arrived at her office daily. He memorized her schedule and happened to appear at her favorite lunch spots. Weekend getaways to exclusive resorts made her feel special, chosen. "He made me feel like the most important person in the world," she said quietly. "No one had ever focused on me like that." Within weeks, however, subtle changes began. Gregory would check her phone while she showered, questioning who certain contacts were. He suggested her friends were using her for connections to his wealthy circle. He made critical comments about her clothing, her hairstyle, her career choices, always framed as helping her improve. "It happened so gradually," Stephanie explained, pulling her knees to her chest. "First, he'd suggest a different outfit because that color makes you look tired. Then he'd order for me at restaurants because he knew what I'd enjoy. Eventually, he was controlling everything: my food, my friends, my schedule. The most painful part was how Gregory had manipulated Stephanie's relationship with me. He'd go through my texts with you and point out hidden criticisms I hadn't noticed. He convinced me you were jealous of my success, my relationship, my whole life." Her voice broke. "When you expressed concerns about him, he twisted it into proof you wanted to sabotage my happiness." The isolation tactics extended to her workplace. Gregory insisted she transfer departments to reduce contact with male colleagues. He began showing up unannounced at her office, charming her coworkers while monitoring her interactions. Her boss, impressed by Gregory's family connections, overlooked the inappropriate behavior. Then came the financial control, Stephanie continued. After their engagement, Gregory convinced her to merge accounts for wedding planning purposes. He took her credit cards, claiming to manage the high balance she'd accumulated buying clothes he'd pressured her to purchase. Soon, she couldn't make even small purchases without his knowledge and approval. The first physical incident occurred about 6 months into their relationship. "I was 15 minutes late coming home from work," Stephanie recalled, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises, saying he'd been worried sick. He cried afterward, promised it would never happen again." I believed him. But it did happen again, with increasing frequency. Gregory developed strategic methods of abuse that wouldn't leave visible marks, twisting her arm behind her back, pressing her against walls, once holding a pillow over her face until she apologized for disrespecting him in front of friends. "He recorded us," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "Intimate moments. He said it was for us, but later used the videos as blackmail. He threatened to send them to my boss, our family, everyone, if I ever tried to leave." Gregory's family, particularly his mother Victoria, were complicit in his behavior. Victoria took me aside before the engagement party and explained how to manage Gregory's moods. She told me which topics to avoid, how to anticipate his needs. She said all Bennett men had passionate temperaments and I needed to adjust my expectations. The wedding planning became a nightmare of control. Gregory insisted on a rushed timeline, giving Stephanie no time to reconsider. His family took over every decision, from venue to guest list. They needed to create the perfect image, she explained. Nothing else mattered. Most devastating was Stephanie's revelation about my wedding exclusion. "I tried to invite you secretly," she confessed. "I addressed an invitation and hid it in my desk at work. Gregory found it during a surprise lunch visit. That night was..." She trailed off, unable to continue. The pregnancy had been another control tactic. Gregory knew I wanted children eventually. One night he told me he'd flushed my birth control pills because accidents make the best stories. Learning she was pregnant just weeks before the wedding had trapped her completely. I couldn't leave carrying his child. The Bennetts would use their influence to take custody, paint me as unstable. The wedding day itself had been a blur of anxiety and performance. Victoria gave me Xanax to calm my nerves. Gregory checked on me every hour, reminding me how much this day meant to his family's reputation. When Eleanor mentioned my name during the reception, Stephanie had seen Gregory's expression change instantly, the mask of charm dropping to reveal pure rage. "I was paralyzed," she whispered, describing the hallway incident. "Watching him attack Mom, I wanted to scream to stop him, but I just froze. Then his father was there and the security guards, and everyone was watching me to see whose side I'd choose." Her choice, siding with Gregory, had been made from terror, not loyalty. The aftermath was a nightmare of gaslighting and isolation. Gregory and his parents controlled the narrative, telling wedding guests Eleanor had been drunk and disorderly. They whisked Stephanie to the Vermont property immediately, confiscating her phone and limiting her access to news. "I only saw the viral video because Gregory was meeting with lawyers and left his laptop open," she explained. "One of the housekeepers showed me. That's when I knew I had to get out, no matter the consequences. I couldn't let my child grow up in that environment." Stephanie had managed to make a secret call to the domestic violence hotline, using a staff member's phone while Gregory was occupied with damage control. The hotline counselor had connected her with local resources, explaining the heightened danger of her situation. As dawn approached, Stephanie's exhausted confession complete, we sat together in silence again. The magnitude of what she'd endured and what still lay ahead weighed heavily between us. "I don't expect forgiveness," she finally said, "especially from Mom. What I allowed to happen is unforgivable." I took her hands in mine. "This wasn't your fault, Steph. Abuse is about control, not love. Gregory systematically broke down your defenses and isolated you from everyone who could have helped. But I chose him over all of you," she insisted. Under duress and manipulation, I countered. "The fact that you're here now, that you found the courage to leave despite everything, shows your true character." For the first time that night, Stephanie smiled faintly. "I kept hearing your voice in my head, all those warnings you gave that I dismissed. You were right about everything." "I wish I hadn't been," I said honestly. We talked until sunrise about the difficult road ahead: legal battles, divorce proceedings, the pregnancy, rebuilding her life. The Bennett family would use every resource to maintain control, especially with a baby involved. But Stephanie's determination was clear. "I'd rather raise this child alone in a studio apartment than in a mansion with Gregory," she stated firmly. As morning light filtered through the windows, Stephanie asked the question that had clearly been troubling her most. "Do you think Mom will ever forgive me?" "Mom loves you unconditionally," I assured her. "She'll need time to process everything, but she never stopped loving you, not for a second." When our parents joined us for breakfast, Eleanor immediately enveloped Stephanie in a long embrace. No words were needed, the path to healing had begun. The calm of the safe house was short-lived. By the following afternoon, Gregory's lawyers had filed a missing person report claiming Stephanie had been kidnapped by her mentally unstable family. Local news picked up the story, forcing Detective Morris to issue a statement confirming Stephanie had left voluntarily and was safe. Laura, my best friend and attorney, connected us with Madison Reynolds, one of the top domestic violence attorneys in the region. Madison arrived at the safe house the next day, her confident professionalism instantly reassuring. "The good news," Madison explained after a lengthy consultation with Stephanie, "is that the viral video works in our favor. It establishes a clear pattern of violent behavior that supports your claims." She outlined our immediate priorities: filing for emergency divorce, securing a protection order, and ensuring Stephanie's financial independence. The legal machinery moved swiftly. Within days, Stephanie had temporary orders of protection against both Gregory and his parents. Madison helped her open new bank accounts and secure emergency funds through domestic violence support organizations. My parents offered financial assistance until Stephanie could access her own money again. Gregory's counterattack was predictably aggressive, His legal team filed motions claiming Stephanie was experiencing prenatal psychosis and had been unduly influenced by her family. They demanded psychological evaluations and attempted to freeze all marital assets. Most disturbingly, they emphasized Stephanie's pregnancy in every filing, laying groundwork for future custody battles. The Bennett family's public relations strategy shifted from denying the assault to portraying Stephanie as mentally unstable. They released carefully selected photos of the couple looking happy, statements from friends describing their perfect relationship, and even medical opinions from doctors who had never treated Stephanie suggesting her behavior indicated severe hormonal imbalance. While Madison handled the legal front, I focused on supporting Stephanie's emotional recovery. We found a therapist specializing in domestic abuse trauma, Dr. Natalie Warren, who began working with Stephanie 3 times weekly. The safe house provided a temporary haven, but we knew Stephanie needed a more permanent solution. 3 weeks after leaving Gregory, Stephanie and I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment with enhanced security features. The location was confidential, the lease under my name to prevent Gregory from tracking her. My husband Michael took over more childcare responsibilities, allowing me to extend my leave of absence from the hospital. The first major court hearing arrived in early autumn. Stephanie, visibly pregnant now at 4 months, appeared calm and composed as Madison presented evidence of Gregory's abuse. The emergency divorce proceedings and protection order were formally approved, though the judge scheduled further hearings to determine financial settlements and eventual custody arrangements. Outside the courthouse, we faced a gauntlet of reporters and curious onlookers drawn by the viral video's notoriety. Gregory arrived in a chauffeur-driven car, his parents and lawyers creating a protective bubble around him. He played the role of concerned husband perfectly, expressing worry for Stephanie's mental health to anyone who would listen. The unexpected breakthrough in our case came from an unlikely source. James Wilson, no relation, Gregory's business partner at Bennett Real Estate, contacted Madison with documentation of financial improprieties within the company. Gregory's behavior has become increasingly erratic, James explained during a deposition. I've witnessed him verbally abuse staff, threaten contractors, and misappropriate company funds for personal use. James provided records showing Gregory had diverted nearly $200,000 from business accounts to pay for private investigators to follow Stephanie, bribe her co-workers for information, and finance his campaign to discredit her. This evidence triggered an internal audit at Bennett Real Estate and drew the attention of the district attorney's office. As legal proceedings intensified, so did the support network around Stephanie. The internet community that had initially been fascinated by the viral video transformed into advocates for domestic violence awareness. A fundraising campaign helped cover legal expenses, while survivor support groups provided practical assistance and emotional encouragement. Stephanie began rebuilding her life piece by piece. Laura's cousin, who owned a boutique marketing firm, offered Stephanie remote work she could manage while pregnant. She started therapy not just with Dr. Warren but also joined a support group for domestic violence survivors. Slowly, her confidence returned. I began seeing glimpses of the vibrant, independent sister I'd known before Gregory. Reclaiming her personal belongings proved challenging. Despite court orders, Gregory consistently created obstacles. When police finally escorted Stephanie to collect essentials from their Boston apartment, she found many items missing or damaged. Her grandmother's jewelry had vanished, family photos were destroyed, and clothes had been cut or stained. Gregory's message was clear. He was punishing her for leaving. The pregnancy brought complicated emotions. Stephanie wanted this child desperately but struggled with the permanent connection it created to Gregory. I'm afraid sometimes, she confessed during a prenatal appointment I accompanied her to. What if the baby has his temper? What if I see him every time I look at my child? Dr. Warren helped her work through these fears, focusing on Stephanie's strength and autonomy as a mother. This baby is equally yours, she reminded Stephanie. You'll be the primary influence in this child's life, not genetics. Thanksgiving arrived, our first major holiday since the wedding disaster. We gathered at my parents' house, the dining room filled with familiar smells and cautious optimism. Stephanie, now showing visibly at 5 months pregnant, helped Mom prepare traditional family recipes. Dad had decorated the house with family photos, deliberately including many of Stephanie and me as children, a visual reminder of her place in our family regardless of recent events. During dinner, Stephanie raised her water glass in an impromptu toast. "I'm grateful for second chances," she said, voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "For family who never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself." The Bennett family's intimidation tactics gradually shifted as their public image crumbled. Clients dropped contracts with their real estate company as the scandal persisted. Gregory's previous victims gained courage from Stephanie's stand, sharing their own experiences with the district attorney. The threatening letters from Bennett lawyers became less frequent as they focused on damage control for their own reputations. A significant turning point came in December when Gregory violated the protection order for the third time, appearing outside Stephanie's therapist's office. The security cameras captured him clearly, and this time, he was arrested and held without bail due to the repeated violations. The district attorney, building on Detective Morris's work, filed criminal charges for both the wedding assault and the protection order violations. As Christmas approached, an unexpected letter arrived addressed to Stephanie. It came from Melissa Bennett, Gregory's younger sister who had maintained minimal contact with the family for years. "I believe you," she wrote simply. "My brother did the same things to my college roommate. I tried to warn her, but no one listened. I have information that might help your case if you want it." Melissa's testimony about the pattern of abuse within the Bennett family, particularly from the men, provided crucial context for Stephanie's case. She described growing up witnessing her father's controlling behavior toward her mother, the family's collective enabling, and the systemic silencing of previous victims through financial settlements and legal intimidation. By January, Stephanie's divorce proceedings had accelerated based on the mounting evidence. The preliminary hearing for Gregory's criminal charges showed the prosecution's substantial case. Stephanie testified with remarkable composure, detailing the escalating abuse, while Gregory sat expressionless at the defense table. Outside the courtroom, I held my sister's hand as reporters shouted questions. "I'm not speaking about the case," she stated firmly, "but I do want to say something to anyone watching who recognizes their own relationship in mine. Trust your instincts. Reach out for help. It's never too late to start over." For the first time since the wedding video went viral, I saw my sister fully reclaiming her voice and her power. The road ahead remained challenging, but watching Stephanie stand tall against the man who had tried to diminish her, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: hope for her future. Easter Sunday, 1 year after the wedding disaster, found our family gathered in my backyard. Spring sunshine warmed the afternoon as Emma led a chaotic egg hunt for her younger cousins. My parents sat on the patio, Dad grilling burgers while Mom bounced 3-month-old Lily on her knee. Stephanie looked radiant as she arranged desserts on the outdoor table. The haunted expression she'd carried for so long had been replaced by quiet confidence. Her body had recovered from pregnancy, and her mind had grown stronger through ongoing therapy. Though she still had difficult days, the resilient sister I'd known all my life had returned. The past year had brought profound changes for all of us. Gregory ultimately served 6 months in jail for assault and harassment, with additional probation terms including mandatory anger management and psychological evaluation. The Bennett family empire suffered irreparable damage as investigations uncovered years of financial improprieties and hidden settlements with previous victims. Stephanie's divorce was finalized after Gregory's conviction, with terms heavily favoring her due to the documented abuse and his criminal record. The financial settlement provided security for her and Lily, though Stephanie had insisted on returning items of sentimental value to the Bennett family as a final gesture of closure. The custody battle we'd anticipated never materialized. Following psychological evaluations ordered by the court, Gregory was granted only supervised visitation rights which, surprisingly, he declined to exercise. His parents made overtures about grandparent rights, but retreated when Stephanie's attorney outlined the rigorous conditions the court would impose given their enabling behavior. My sister had rebuilt her life with remarkable determination. She completed her degree in early childhood education, a passion she'd abandoned when Gregory deemed it beneath their social status. She now worked part-time with a domestic violence prevention organization, sharing her story to help others recognize warning signs she had missed. The hardest part, Stephanie had told me recently, was forgiving myself. For ignoring red flags, for choosing Gregory over my family, for letting Mom get hurt. Through therapy, she'd come to understand how Gregory's calculated manipulation had exploited her vulnerabilities and isolated her from those who could have helped earlier. Our parents had their own healing journey. Dad's health stabilized with reduced stress and proper medication. Mom channeled her experience into volunteer work with elderly abuse victims, finding purpose in supporting others who felt voiceless. Together, they'd renewed their marriage through counseling, learning to communicate more openly about difficult emotions. I had returned to nursing but shifted to a part-time schedule to maintain better work-life balance. The crisis had reinforced what truly mattered: family, health, and honest relationships. Michael and I had grown closer through supporting Stephanie, our partnership strengthened by navigating the crisis together. As we gathered around the table for Easter dinner, Stephanie tapped her glass for attention. "I want to propose something," she announced. "Last year at this time, I was trapped in a nightmare, convinced I had no way out. Today, I'm surrounded by the people who never gave up on me, even when I gave up on myself." She glanced at baby Lily, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. "I'd like to start a new family tradition. Every Easter, let's celebrate what I'm calling Truth and Courage Day, when we promise to always speak honestly to each other, no matter how difficult the truth might be." Dad raised his glass. "To truth and courage," he echoed, his voice thick with emotion. We all joined the toast, the simple words carrying profound meaning for our family. The past year had taught us that real family loyalty meant standing for truth, not enabling lies. Sometimes, love required the courage to speak uncomfortable truths, even when it risked relationships. After dinner, Stephanie and I sat on the porch swing watching Emma play with her cousins on the lawn. Lily stirred in Stephanie's arms, tiny fingers grasping at sunshine. "Do you remember Lake Winnipesaukee?" Stephanie asked suddenly. "Those summer vacations when we were kids?" I smiled at the memory. "The cabin with the creaky screen door? Dad fishing at dawn while we collected shells?" "I want to take Lily there," Stephanie said decisively. "And Emma too. I want them to have those same memories we had, to know what a healthy, happy family feels like." "We'll book it for July," I agreed. "Same cabin if it's available." As sunset painted the sky in watercolor hues, I reflected on our journey. The viral wedding video that had exposed Gregory's true nature had been just the beginning. The real story was about a family finding its way back to each other, speaking truths that needed to be heard, and rebuilding on a foundation of authentic love and respect. The trauma had changed us all, but it hadn't defeated us. In many ways, we were stronger for having faced it together. Watching Stephanie gently rock Lily while humming a lullaby, I felt profound gratitude for second chances and new beginnings. If my family's story has resonated with you in any way, please consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear this message of hope after family betrayal. Have you ever had to stand up for a difficult truth that others weren't ready to hear? I'd love to read your experiences in the comments below. And if you found value in this journey through family trauma to healing, please subscribe for more stories about overcoming life's challenges and finding justice after betrayal. Your support means everything during this continuing healing process for our family. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is speak the truth, even when it's the hardest path to take.